I couldn't believe it when my husband questioned why my mom was eating. These were the words he uttered during a phone call while he was away for work. Throughout the 5 years of our marriage, our relationship had been rocky. Our infrequent conversations usually ended in arguments. He seldom returned to the house I shared with my mother-in-law. One day, after a long day at work, I arrived home to find that Danny had sent homemade cookies. My mother-in-law had opened them without asking and started eating them right as I called my husband. When I told him, he panicked. Suddenly, my mother-in-law collapsed. I rushed her to the emergency room, where I was stunned by the revelations that followed. I immediately contacted the police. My name is Anna. I'm 29 years old and work at a beauty consultant. I met my husband Jason during a group blind date organized by colleagues from my salon. Initially, I was reluctant and skipped most invitations, but one night, under the guise of a girls' night out, I attended. During those days, my focus was solely on improving my nail art skills. The last time I had a boyfriend was back in my student days. My colleagues, concerned about my disinterest in dating, had been planning this setup for a while. Ironically, this led me to meet Jason, who also works in home inspector. He was brought to the party as a filler, just like me. While others were enjoying the party, Jason and I found ourselves deep in conversation in a corner. He shared his passion for cooking, spending his days off preparing intricate dishes and desserts. Impressed by his culinary skills, I suggested he consider turning his hobby into a career. But he just laughed it off, preferring to keep his passion as just a hobby. We hit it off and exchanged numbers, planning to go out for dinner. A few days later, I was invited to his house. I arrived a bit nervous, but was greeted by a lavish feast. The food was as delightful as the company, making the evening truly memorable. As I enthusiastically enjoyed my meal, I caught Jason watching me with a joyful expression. Once we finished eating, he shared his feelings with me, and we decided to start dating. Over the next 4 years, I indulged in the wonderful meals Jason cooked, which were so good that I happily gained a bit more weight. His guidance in the kitchen broadened my culinary skills significantly. Together, we traveled far and wide, exploring new places and tasting different cuisines. Those 4 years were smooth sailing, no major arguments, and my career was flourishing. I felt incredibly fortunate to have met Jason. On my birthday, after 5 fulfilling years together, Jason proposed. The sight of the sparkling ring brought tears to my eyes. I felt assured that life with him would be peaceful and filled with happiness. Our wedding ceremony went smoothly, blessed by the presence of my kind-hearted in-laws who embraced me warmly, treating me as if I were their own daughter. Having been married for 26 years themselves, they exemplified closeness and love. Although they lived far from us and I knew we wouldn't see them often, I felt a strong bond would grow between us. Life with Jason continued to be wonderful. Whoever got home first would prepare the meal, and often I'd come home to a feast that whisked away the day's fatigue as I dined. Jason watched me eat with happiness, and we maintained the same loving relationship as when we first started dating. However, after 5 blissful years of marriage, our lives took a sudden turn. My father-in-law collapsed at work and sadly passed away. The loss hit us hard, and it was especially tough on my mother-in-law, given their deep bond. At the hospital, seeing her in tears, I felt at a loss for words. The grief took its toll, and my mother-in-law, who had never missed a day of work, found herself unable to return to her job and eventually quit. The days that followed were challenging as we navigated this profound sadness together. My husband and I made it a point to regularly visit my mother-in-law, but her spirits seemed perpetually low. Each visit left me wondering how I could lift her mood. One day, during one of our routine checks, my husband blurted out a proposal to his mother. "Why don't you come and live with us, Mom?" I was taken aback, not having been privy to this idea beforehand. But considering he was an only child and his mother had no other relatives, the thought of leaving her by herself was troubling. Living together seemed like the best way to support her. Although I was not opposed to the idea, I wished my husband had discussed it with me first. Before I could express my thoughts, my mother-in-law turned to me and asked, "Anna, are you okay with this?" "Of course, I'm sure. "Let's live together," I replied with a smile, which seemed to bring her the most joy I had seen in a long time. Truthfully, I was a bit nervous about the arrangement. Living with her was never something I had anticipated. However, knowing her as a calm and gentle person, I believed that our home would remain as peaceful as it had been when just my husband and I were there. At first, I thought lightly of the move, but I soon realized my naivety. A few days into our new living arrangement, I came home to find my mother-in-law saying, "Anna, welcome home." "I hung your laundry out to dry." I was grateful for her help, but was quick to remind her to take it easy. I then went to the balcony to collect the laundry, only to discover that the clothes I had set aside for hand washing had been machine washed together. They had shrunk and the colors had bled into each other. My favorite items were ruined. I wondered if she had noticed the mistake when she hung them up to dry. However, I couldn't really fault her since I hadn't clarified which clothes were meant for hand washing. I approached her gently. "The clothes in this basket are for hand washing, so I would appreciate it if you could avoid putting them in the washing machine next time." I said this softly, hoping not to upset her, but she didn't respond. I began to feel a twinge of regret, wondering if I should have ever mentioned the laundry issue. Despite my repeated reminders, my mother-in-law continued to mistakenly wash the hand-wash-only clothes in the machine. My clothes sometimes stayed damp in the washer, or even worse, ended up in the trash. 3 weeks into this pattern, I couldn't shake the feeling that these weren't just accidents, they felt like acts of harassment. I tried to handle things tactfully, washing my delicate items myself at night and asking her to avoid entering my room. Yet the small annoyances persisted. Whenever I brought it up, my husband would dismiss my concerns, suggesting perhaps it was all just a misunderstanding. His disbelief only added to my frustration. Then, one day, after my mother-in-law had done some cleaning, I was horrified to find my practice nail tools I had used since my vocational school days and cherished deeply tossed in the trash. They weren't just tools, they were symbols of my growth and perseverance in my career. Seeing them discarded like that, I lost my composure. "Please don't throw away my things," I implored. "And stop messing with the laundry. Are you trying to upset me on purpose? If something is bothering you, just talk to me." In the heat of the moment, I raised my voice. My mother-in-law retorted, accusing me of nagging and justifying her actions by claiming the items were dirty, implying that any issue was my fault. She looked unfazed by my distress, which only fueled my anger further. That's when my husband walked in. "Anna, what are you doing?" he asked, startled by the scene. Before I could explain, my mother-in-law painted herself as the victim, twisting the truth to Jason. When I tried to defend myself, Jason took her side, suggesting that I was being unreasonable, especially given her health. Feeling utterly unsupported, I broke down in tears. Even after that confrontation, the small irritations continued, and every dispute saw my husband siding with his mother. Our relationship began to suffer deeply. He stopped cooking, a shared activity that used to bring us joy and connection. I often found myself wishing we could return to the harmonious life we had before we all moved in together. The only relief came when my husband was home during those times. My mother-in-law's behavior would notably improve, sparing me from further stress in his presence. Working didn't scare me, even on days when my husband was off and at home. However, about a year into our strained living arrangement, during a rare dinner with the three of us, my husband dropped a bombshell. "I'm going to be transferred to a new place by myself next month," he announced abruptly. Shocked, I immediately questioned him. "A transfer? By yourself?" His response was that he had already decided, reasoning that he didn't tell me sooner because he thought I would object. He knew how I felt, yet he chose not to discuss it. I tried to ask if all three of us could move with him, but he brushed that off, saying he'd be back in a few years and it wasn't necessary for us to relocate. His knowledge of the tension between my mother-in-law and me, yet his apparent lack of concern, left me worried. I argued daily against his decision, but he dismissed my concerns. Eventually, he snapped, "Shut up! I'm trying to make a living in a place I don't know, so you would keep up with it too," and left for his new job alone. Life at home turned into a nightmare. The harassment from my mother-in-law escalated. She tampered with my laundry, threw away my favorite dishes and clothes, and opened my packages without permission. The situation worsened daily. My husband's rare calls were accusatory. "You bullied Mom again, didn't you?" he'd say, influenced by whatever my mother-in-law told him. Our conversations inevitably turned into arguments. At home, it was a constant battle with my mother-in-law, and on the phone with my husband. I was exhausted and disillusioned. Work became my only refuge, the one place where I could momentarily forget the turmoil at home. I was grateful for my job, more than ever. One evening, a year into this ordeal, I returned from work to find my mother-in-law indulging in some cookies. "These are the best cookies I've ever had," she remarked loud enough for me to hear, but I didn't respond and went about preparing dinner. Then my phone rang. Expecting another stressful conversation, I hesitantly answered. "Did you enjoy the homemade cookies I made?" my husband asked cheerfully. It was then I realized it was Valentine's Day. He hadn't been home for my birthday or our anniversary and never sent any gifts. Yet here he was, remembering to send cookies, albeit indirectly through a situation that no longer felt like home. I was puzzled about why my husband decided to send homemade cookies. It seemed that the cookies my mother-in-law was raving about were indeed the ones he made. Her exclamations were so loud because she had opened my package and eaten them without asking. When I coldly informed him that his mother had enjoyed the cookies, his confused response surprised me. "Your mother took the liberty of opening the package and eating them," I explained, emphasizing her habitual disregard for my privacy. Suddenly, he exclaimed in a loud voice, "Are you kidding me? Why is Mom eating them?" Then a loud noise interrupted us. My mother-in-law had collapsed. I quickly ended the call, telling him I'd call back and dialed for an ambulance. At the hospital, the emergency treatment stabilized her, but the doctor's next words stunned me. She may have ingested poisonous mushrooms. Instantly, I thought of the cookies. It seemed unlikely, but what else could it be? I informed the doctor and contacted the police. They arrived promptly and tested the remaining cookies, confirming the presence of poisonous mushrooms. It dawned on me then, was this why he had eagerly asked if I had eaten them? Distressed and confused by his motives, I directed the police to his location and returned to the hospital. When my mother-in-law regained consciousness, I relayed the discovery of the mushrooms. Tears filled her eyes as she apologized, confessing her jealousy and consistent meanness. "I think Jason wanted me to eat them," I said, to which she shockingly replied, "Jason told me to feed them to you." "I'm so sorry," she continued, revealing that she had often spoken ill of me to my husband. In response, he had devised a plan to send me these tainted cookies, suggesting they would cause only a mild stomach ache, not life-threatening, but enough, he hoped, to provoke me into seeking a divorce. I was horrified. This went beyond marital discord. It was manipulative and dangerous. My mother-in-law expressed regret not just for her actions, but for participating in this twisted plot. As we talked, it was clear that whatever pain she felt was not just a stomachache, but a deep remorse for the role she had played in this disturbing scheme. When I learned my mother-in-law had eaten the cookies herself to prevent her son from being implicated in a potentially fatal incident, I was utterly shaken. Her intentions, albeit misguided, were to protect her son, but her actions had also made her an accomplice in this sinister plot. "This isn't something you can simply apologize for," I told her, my voice trembling with anger and disbelief. "Do you think you've protected me by doing this? You're an accomplice as well, you know? Jason should be arrested by now." I didn't want to see her anymore. I was so distraught that when she continued to apologize, I sternly told her, "I don't want to see your face ever again." On my way home, the police called to inform me that my husband had been arrested. Once I received the call, I hurried home, packed my belongings, and moved back to my parents' house. Later, after he was released, I had my lawyer contact him to fill out the divorce papers. The divorce was finalized swiftly, and it was arranged that I would receive alimony. During the proceedings, my lawyer revealed that my husband had been having an affair with a colleague from work before he moved out. He had blamed the tense atmosphere at home, worsened by the poor relationship between his mother and me, as a pretext for his actions. That's no reason to have an affair, I thought indignantly. He had manipulated the situation to spend more time with his affair partner, even requesting a transfer for himself. He had hoped that by becoming distant and cold, I would initiate a divorce. When I didn't take the bait, his frustration led him to commit this unimaginable act. Reflecting on the years I had endured this marriage, I regretted not acting sooner. I had clung to a sliver of hope that he might return to the kind, loving husband he was when we first married. But facing the reality of his betrayal, I wished I had demanded a divorce much earlier. It was heartbreaking to realize that the cooking of his, which I had once loved so much, had become a tool in such a troubling scheme against me. After his release from prison, my husband found himself jobless due to the scandal and his arrest. Rumors of his affair had circulated at his workplace, leading to both him and his affair partner being terminated. She eventually moved on, leaving him to return to his mother's house. With a criminal record hanging over him, finding new employment became a seemingly insurmountable challenge. Financially drained from the affair, he was left with little savings and began borrowing money to make ends meet. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law, perhaps in a twist of ironic justice, began treating my husband with the same harshness she had once directed at me. It seemed she wanted him to understand the difficulty I'd faced under her roof. For a while, I was overwhelmed by everything that had happened and found it hard to talk to anyone about it. However, with the encouragement and support of my family, I began to find my footing again. I decided to use the alimony and the savings I had diligently accumulated since my student days to pursue a long-held dream, opening my own beauty consultant at home. On the day I opened my salon, my former colleagues showed up with flowers and gifts, celebrating this new chapter in my life. Despite the challenges I had faced, working as a nail artist always allowed me to escape the hardships and focus on creating beauty. Now, running my own salon, I was filled with a profound sense of joy and accomplishment. I'm grateful for the steady stream of appointments. The worries of my past seem distant now as I immerse myself in work I truly love. The smiles and satisfaction of my customers, seeing their beautifully done nails, bring me immense happiness and remind me every day why I followed this path.